Why is nothing working? But I think I'm all good now. Okay.
This is
Let me do this because I think that's it. Okay. Now it's running smoothly. Okay. Great. Three, two, one. Hi guys. Welcome. Hold on. Okay, I'm recording. I have to do it again. Sorry.
okay.
Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast. I've been meaning to watch that. I am your host Monica. We are back again with a new topic, new guest like we do every single week. And this week we have a very special guest with us today. Today we have honestly one of my favorite TikTokers. I think
Oh
he's someone
no.
who he is. I enjoy watching his videos, and I know that you guys have seen him on your timeline before. He is very smart, very insightful, very funny. I've never watched a video where someone broke down a video game franchise in such a thoughtful way, in the same way that you have. And I was like, you see, this is the kind of shit that I sign up for. So I would like for us all to welcome to the podcast Christian Divine.
Hey.
Christian, thank you so much for being here and joining us on the podcast. So happy to have you.
No, thank you for having me. No, it's cool. It's cool.
Awesome,
Thanks.
awesome. So great for you to be here. Guys, today we're going to be talking about the American Society of Magical Negroes, everyone's favorite new film. And really, we're just going to be diving into this new form of media that's been coming out, and whether it's television or movies, of content that is about black culture and racism and like black people's position in society, somehow watered down for white people to understand, which I feel like will be a very interesting conversation. But before we jump into that, we're going to go into our first segment, which is Media Mania, where we talk about new releases and entertainment news. And the first bit of entertainment news that I wanted to discuss is something that I honestly saw a little while ago that I was actually surprised to see. And apparently, the creators of South Park and Kendrick Lamar are making a TV show together. This is something
Mm,
that I think was announced during CinemaCon, which was middle of April, I believe. So, creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker are combining forces with rapper Kendrick Lamar for a live action comedy feature from Paramount Pictures, which I think will be interesting, to say the least, because there have been a lot of. I've seen other rappers make TV shows. Like, I know that Vince Staples currently has a show on Netflix that's like loosely based off of his real life. And
mm.
it's really good. I've seen it and it's really great. So I'm interested in this, but I'm also interested in the fact that like it was the creators of South Park that were like, I don't know if he chose to work with them. There hasn't been any other news besides the fact that this show is being worked on. But I just think it's an interesting piece of news that I saw the other day. You know?
Yeah, I've heard about this. I heard it's a film. At first, I heard it was going to be a musical, which it might still be. It might be a film musical, but really bizarre. Have you ever seen or heard anything from the Book of Mormon?
Yes.
Because the Book of Mormon is wildly popular. It's still running on Broadway, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's if you're mixing their styles, it's going to come out to something like that. But not a collab I would have expected in any way whatsoever,
Yeah.
at all. Um,
I'm I did forget that like they did do the Book of Mormon, which admittedly was one of my favorite musicals growing up. So
mm,
now thinking about Book of Mormon with like Kendrick Lamar is such a strange combination to me. I can't like piece it together if I'm being honest,
ye-
but
yeah, this is the thing that I feel like as much as because I don't really watch South Park. I used to watch it a ton. I stopped watching it as I got older, but like they're good at structure, they're good at story structure, they're good at song structure in particular. And the thing that I had heard about it a while ago was that it was not as like not autobiographical in the way that like Vince Staples' show is, but more like along the lines of this is sort of maybe a kooky music involved story of somebody from Compton of like this whole thing happening. And I mean, I'm curious. It feels like maybe it's because Kendrick Lamar's inspired music and maybe they're helping with the story structure and plot. Maybe he just finds South Park funny. He's a weird guy. I don't know what's happening here. I have no idea what to expect.
To be honest, I want to keep an open mind about it because Kendrick Lamar is an amazing musical artist, and I know that like also Kid Cudi put out like a movie on Netflix called Intergalactic, which is kind of like a romance movie with some of his music like inspired by it. So when I saw this project, I was thinking maybe it's kind of like that, but with like a comedic appeal to it, which I feel like it could work and I feel like it could be really good, but it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of hear about it in the news and you don't really know what to expect to come out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think just like uh, idealistically, I would not pair up like the style of South Park and the style of Matt Parker and Trey Songz they're writing with Kendrick Lamar at all. They just seem like entirely different worlds. So I truly don't know. Like even with like Vince Staples show or Atlanta or things like this, all that kind of yeah, that tracks for those people. But this is like really, feels out of left field.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that, but I want to be hopeful that's going to be good.
Uh,
Maybe it will. Hopefully it will be good because I don't want like Kendrick Lamar to end up with a project that has like a 30% around tomatoes. That would be really disappointing.
oh yeah, rough.
Yeah, because imagine like you are a Pulitzer Prize winning musical artist, but the first endeavor you have into media is like a flop.
Hey, it can happen. It can happen real rough. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that both. I mean, South Park's really successful and really well liked. So I feel like the like a directing team there is probably solid.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There have been a lot of new projects coming out recently, and one project that I did see that I was certainly surprised by. Don't know why this was made, but Netflix has a Good Times reboot that came out, and the funny thing is, this reboot is spearheaded by creator of Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane. He is the executive producer, and he is also, I think he also plays like a character in this show, but he plays like a crack dealer, which is very confusing as to why he would give himself that role. But yeah, the show came out and nobody really liked it. And I was just confused by why this show was even made to begin with because the cast is very solid. You have very talented people in the cast, but a Good Times reboot is definitely not what people want to see nowadays, you know?
It's interesting. I think that like, because I haven't watched it yet, but I did look up a lot of interviews and stuff with the original cast to see what their involvement was. And apparently they have some cameos, but weren't all that knowledgeable on the like the direction that the project took. And I feel because it is the thing about it, if you've seen it, it's like every stereotype in the book, right? It's this truly just like weird, bizarre, like why is Seth MacFarlane in charge of this? It's just like, yeah, all we care about is welfare and our drug dealing baby. And I'm like, all right, all right. And I feel like we're in an era where people really like reboots, people are living in the nostalgia, but like to make a reboot of what was considered to be a soft but like a family friendly kind of show to turn it into what is essentially just this mashup of stereotypes hiding under the guise of like, oh, this is satire, but like
Mm-hmm.
where if the humor is derived at like, look at them being ghetto, like that doesn't really feel, it doesn't feel there. And so it's I don't know, it's like I could see why you'd want to make a Good Times reboot. I think there's probably a market for a little family show, but it's Good Times in name only. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. The unfortunate thing is that I actually did start watching the show, but I only got to like episode two because I hate to say this. First thing I saw in the show is just that it's ugly. Like the show is just
Mm,
unappealing to look at. And of course, you cannot judge a show that way. Like you can't just watch a show because it's aesthetically pleasing. That's not right.
mm.
But it's ugly, it's not funny, it's repetitive, it's stale, and it's so hard to get through because as much as I love JB Smooth, as much as I absolutely love Yvette Nicole Brown, like I think she's an amazing actress, I find the show to just be bad. And it's very disappointing when you watch something and you want to like finish it because like if you watch a show all the way through once it drops on Netflix, then that helps the show to get a second season. And initially I'd even want to watch the show because outright I'm like I'm not going to like the show. And whenever I see a
Yeah.
show and I'm like, I'm not gonna like it, it's not my vibe, I just don't watch it. But then I'm like, you know what? Let's try to have an open mind for once. And I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? I was right. I wasted an hour of my time trying to
Mm.
like this show. And it's even more disappointing when you see shows like Rap Shit get canceled, The Wonder Years get canceled, and you greenlit something like this, which is produced by Seth MacFarlane and Norman Lear, who is like a titan in the television industry. It's it's confusing to me because it's clear that with the TV shows you make with black cast, we're not going in the direction where you're relying on stereotypes for people to laugh anymore, because that shit was never funny to begin with, but people realize now that like it's really not funny. And when I watch shows like this, I just sit to myself and I think, when you're reading the script for this project and you're envisioning this series, what makes you say yes? You know, like what
Mm.
really makes you say yes to this? Because after watching the second episode, I was just kind of like, I can't, I can't not fully say that like I believe that you read like the script and was like, oh yeah, I wholeheartedly sign my name on this project and I believe in it like 110%. Like it has to be a check or has to be something because you couldn't have thought that this would have gone well. It's
Yeah.
it's bad.
Yeah, I mean that's the feeling that I got from the trailer. I'm surprised that you tried to give it any effort to try to like it, because from the trailer and from the
Yeah,
outset, I was like, "Oh, this is a mistake." Like the fact that it's made it, like it feels like one focus group would have been like, "Hey, like don't
yeah.
don't let people see this trailer." They had already poured a bunch of money into it. I don't know. It might have just been money, people who had ideas. It feels very bizarre. It feels like something genuinely. When I saw the original trailer, I it felt like a Boondocks sketch, like a bit that would have existed to make fun of the kind of programming that someone would try to do. And I was like, all right, well, yeah, I truly don't understand. It's just one of those projects that I'm like, I don't know who greenlit this, who thought it was a good idea, how like every script meeting they went through. Who hold on, let me check something, because it's not just Seth MacFarlane and Norman Lear. There's one black person on the team who's
Mm-hmm.
like, let me see, good times.
I do want to say, I think you're right that people are like stuck in this nostalgic phase of like making new television shows, and with like rumors
Yeah.
of like Boondocks being rebooted, and like I would love everybody hates Chris to like possibly get a revival,
Mm.
um, because I love Tashina Arnold. I think she's amazing, but not everything that you loved in the past needs like a breath of fresh air in the present. You can just leave it in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I'm trying to see these serious writing credits. It's like it's interesting. Yeah, some of the people are, I feel like, this is just primarily a mistake. It seems like some of the people are Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry was
What?
also he was an executive producer on the show. I forgot about that. That was a really big thing, is like Norman Lear, Seth MacFarlane, Stephen Curry.
Wow.
And then trying to see if there's specifically a showrunner, but it seems as if they do have a lot of writers here who the directors are different than like the writers. Got Carl Jones, who was you have people from the Boondocks working on the animation. You have
Mm-hmm.
Mike Evans is the original. Oh, that's yeah. Who's the executive story editor here? We got Joshua Christ. It's like, yeah, it's a bizarre group of people. I think that like I'm not entirely sure how they how they went about this. Um, and like the director has worked on Bob's Burgers. He's worked on like some other notable TV things, and that feels odd.
I, I mean, I love Bob's Burgers. I think Bob's Burgers works as a television show because the premise is like a struggling family with a burger restaurant. And that's something
Yeah,
that you can repeat episode after episode after episode. But that's something that can also be like translated to so many different experiences. And when you
yeah,
have a show that has like that solid foundation, that is the perfect maker of a series that can go on for as long as you want it to and as long as the network will allow it. But when you have a show that's based on outdated stereotypes and jokes that no longer fit the cultural landscape that we currently live in, then how does your show have a leg to stand on when it's just like
yeah,
on some shaky stuff?
yeah. Yeah, it's just an odd thing that happened. I truly all the people involved here, like really
Yeah.
bizarre, and a lot of black people in the writing room, which it feels even weirder.
Mm-hmm. It's
So
it does feel strange to see that show be made because I don't want to like assume anything about like the black people who have like taken part in creating the series because I know in Hollywood it's hard to come by jobs and you want to be able to like work and create things and you want your name on something big like being able to write a Netflix series is obviously something that's like a big deal, but if it's not something that looks good in your portfolio, then is it really worth it?
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I
Yeah,
might be speaking from a privileged perspective because I am not a Hollywood TV writer or anything like that. You know,
that's fair. Yeah,
I don't want to judge
yeah,
anybody who's trying to like get by. I get it. Like we all were paying attention during the writer strike. Like Hollywood's in
yeah,
shambles. So
for sure,
I'm just trying to
sure,
have
for sure.
grace. Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't have that same grace, but fair enough.
Yeah, but I feel like that was like a fitting story, and what we're talking about today, which is the American Society of Magical Negroes, which is a new film that came out this year, and it's a very interesting film that was released because oftentimes whenever I see a movie come out and it seems like I hate using this term, but like when both sides don't like the movie, it's like, oh, why is that? You know, there are,
Interesting.
yeah, there are those people that you see online that don't like the fact that Marvel is diverse. So when they see like
Mm,
American Society of Magical Negroes, they automatically say, this movie's too woke, this movie's too diverse. Oh my gosh, here comes Hollywood
yeah.
again with their woke agenda. But then there are people that the movie is actually marketed towards, and they see the trailer and it's like, girl, I don't know about this one.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if this is for me. So I think from the initial reaction from the trailer, I already knew that I wasn't going to watch American Society of Magical Negroes, despite the fact that Justice Smith is in this film, and I do love Justice Smith as an actor, but it was something that didn't really pique my interest and didn't pique a lot of people's interest because it was pulled from theaters just a few weeks after it was released, which is very disappointing, I would
Yeah.
say.
I think that like what's interesting is that when I saw the teaser trailer, I personally was very interested because the teaser trailer is like, I think that there were a lot of people who were expecting a sort of like Harry Potter scenario, but I was like, okay, this is gonna be a movie that makes fun of this trope, right? This whole magical, they set it up for that. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for that. And they released the full trailer, and it's like, oh, this is going to be a romance story about like, and like, and not to get too into it, but like a romance story about like a mixed race black person like fawning over another like ethnically ambiguous but most definitely like not black person. And it's like, oh, like I think people were there for the magic, they were there for like whatever the satire or the critique of this stereotype would be, and then it reveals that it's like, oh, it's not really going to be about that, it's a love story. And you're like, oh, great. Like, this is, so then why pull this entire thing into it if it's not going to be a proper critique of the archetype? It says some vague things about race in the movie, but I think the trailer just like, people were already disappointed, and I feel like the full revelation of a revelation of what the plot was gonna be was even more disappointing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The American Society of Magical Negroes, directed and written by Kobe Libby, who is an actor turned director. And the film follows Justice Smith, who is Aaron, like you said, a mixed race black man who is a struggling artist. He has a yarn sculpture that he was trying
Yeah.
to like display in an art gallery at the beginning of the film, and I feel like when I first saw that I was like, oh my god, this is like this is a joke. Y'all are giving people fake jobs and they live in these nice
Yeah.
apartments and these movies and these TV shows. And when I saw that I
Yeah.
was like, this is going to be fun, this is going to be great. And
Okay.
I
You saw continue.
I was just gonna say, like, watching the teaser like you did, I think I was kind of interested in just like the premise of the film, but I already knew that like maybe it wasn't gonna be for me because I was just kind of like, oh, that looks cute, not my thing. You know, it's like
Interesting.
that's fine. And then when the trailer came out revealing that's like there's a romance story involved, I was just like, all right, that doesn't really make sense because why are we including this white, racially ambiguous girl into the plot where she does not need to be in the plot? But yeah, watching the movie, I do have to say, like, just initial thoughts. I got through like when he first meets the girl, I was like, oh, I actually like this dynamic. This is gonna be bad.
Interesting. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because this is my thing when you're like, it's fine because like I feel like Kobe is a new director and writer, so like I'm trying to extend some grace to him. If you're writing a movie for the first time, maybe it could be hard to find your story and really have a like
Yeah.
solid foundation. Like I get that. I've never written a full screenplay before, so I'm gonna say that out the gate. But it was clear that like their dynamic was really good. But if you're shoehorning it into another story that requires world building, that requires foundation, that requires some kind of direction, you can't just throw a romance in there because that throws things off. You know?
Interesting. Interesting. I find it, I will say, as just a side note, I find it interesting that you found their dynamic good. I feel like the whole time I was sitting there at every, like from the very outset of the film where we're there with the yarn sculpture, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
there's something offbeat about the pacing of where they're trying to get the jokes here. And then also like style wise, it felt a little like made for TV. Like in
Mm-hmm.
a way, it was like, I know they have a budget, why is this so like uninteresting to watch right now? And then when they start flirting, there's a moment where they meet in the coffee shop, bumps into her. I was just like, I don't believe I was so out of it by that point that I was just watching it and I was like, I'm trying to see where the ups are, like the ups are in this movie, and it's just like it was hard for me to find redeeming qualities from the just like the pacing of it, especially. It
Mm-hmm.
just felt like whenever they were trying to do something funny, that there's just this huge gap where I think they expected people to find it funny, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Yeah. I
no,
think no, that is very true that there are a lot of like those strange pauses in the film that I also noticed. Um I also think that Justice Smith is I think he's a good actor. I do.
yeah,
But there are parts in the movie where you're watching it and it just kind of feels like he's just kind of like going along with what's happening. It doesn't really feel like he's
yeah,
like taking on the character of Aaron. And I just say that because I've seen him do other things and I've seen him like fully act and like commit to like character before, and I'm like, okay, this guy has so much potential, he has so much talent, he's doing so good. And in this movie it felt like he had references for like his
mm,
personal life, which he had mentioned like interviews before, how like he would have to make himself feel small in order to like feel comfortable around white people. But in this film it just kind of felt like he's just there sometimes. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I do know. I feel as if consistently, and I don't know if this is a direction thing. I haven't seen. I don't think. I think there's one thing that I've seen him in, but specifically, like he doesn't ever appear as shocked as someone should be to
Mm,
learning the things happen. Like when they're teleporting and he's in the magical Negro society and he's being brought into the secret places, he's just like, "Oh, what? No, you can't just act like that didn't happen." And I'm like,
right.
"Yeah, you should be more surprised by the magical Negroes." I feel like in general, there's no like also like they miss the details of if they're going to give you like a little training arc, right? Where it's like, whoa, like I actually solved these problems.
Mm-hmm.
The way the magical Negro-ness works in the movie is not interesting or that funny. Things just happen. Like if he's there and he's being nice, the things will happen. The things will appear. He doesn't, there's no like clever, like, oh, the magical Negro is doing this, this, and this to make this happen. And I it just feels like it falls flat in that way to get to the story that they're trying to tell,
Mm-hmm.
which it feels like the story that they're trying to tell is one about less so about breaking down the trope and more about being like black people should feel comfortable, like black people should be like not comfortable might be the wrong word, but like the whole diversity hire thing where it's like I should not have to make white people feel comfortable
Yeah.
rather than like, and I think that like that's the not the right story to tell with this archetype, rather than like, why is this? You can make a plot about black people being uncomfortable in white spaces without the magical Negro trope. If you're going to bring that
Mm-hmm.
trope in, it feels like you should question it. You should really look at it and be like, why is it that this is expected? You
Mm-hmm.
know?
That's very true because the parallel with like the magical Negro and navigating white spaces is something that I think would have been really interesting to explore in the film, but the movie doesn't spend a lot of time laying down like the ground rules in the world of being a magical Negro. So it just feels like the society has to make their white client happy no matter
Yeah.
what. Like that's all that it is. And if he breaks the rules, it takes away everyone else's magic, which seems ridiculous with how many people are in the society. I feel like it's impossible for no one to have
Yeah.
broken the rules before and for everyone to lose their magic. It's like that's shaky ground to be,
Yeah.
committing to your world building.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a weird. It's their MacGuffin. It's the stakes. They had to create some stakes for him to not get involved with the girl
Mm-hmm.
because it would interfere. But yeah, I it's weird. I was going to. I think what I was expecting, right, and that I was shocked that they didn't do is. Have you seen Monsters Inc?
Yeah.
I was like, this would work actually super well as a Monsters Inc. sort of thing, where like they go through, they have to power the things through children's screams, but they figure out that laughs work just as well. And
Mm-hmm.
if this whole plot is that like the way that we bring or keep black people safe is by keeping white discomfort down. What if it's like a much more interesting plot would be them finding out that they don't have to, like the magical Negro society realizing that it's not that they have to keep like white discomfort down in order to
Mm-hmm.
have their freedom. And that's a way more interesting, like, oh, let's break this down. But it's like, no, no, no. They just need a MacGuffin for him to be kicked out and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, or like stakes for why he can't be with the girl. Because ultimately, what they're trying to do is get to this romance and personal story.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it feels like they didn't understand what to do with the magical Negro part, and they needed
Mm-hmm.
just it's just there as a condition.
That's very true. And I did notice in the movie there was like one black woman that like broke the rules. But the thing is with her is that like she had her powers revoked,
Yeah,
but Justice Smith's character didn't face that same punishment. So then I'm
yeah,
watching the movie and I'm like, okay, well why don't you take away his powers too so he can be with Homegirl, so that we can
yeah.
wrap this up.
Because it's then it doesn't work. Because then it doesn't work, right? It's like the stakes that they set up were very flimsy
Mm-hmm.
to keep the plot moving. It's like, oh, the tension here is that you have to do this or everybody's magic goes away. But then if everybody's magic goes away, who cares about white discomfort? It's like ultimately a stake that like the audience itself isn't going to be invested in. Like, whoa, 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 if he does this, white people are going to be uncomfortable. It's like, I don't care about that as an audience member. I don't feel. And he's like, oh, he's not going to be in the Society of Magical Negroes. He'll just be happy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just the stakes don't feel that pressing or that important, or as if they all went wrong. That like it's not like we get to know the other magical Negroes really, besides what's his face,
David.
David Allen Greer,
Mm-hmm.
the main one,
Yeah.
and like it's
Another
doesn't feel like
thing
his life depends on it.
Yeah. Another thing is that this is something I notice in a lot of movies. Whenever you have like a younger actor and an older actor playing like alongside each other, like acting alongside each other, they have to match each other in like acting ability in some way. You know,
Yeah.
a good example I would say would be Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour, because I feel like the two
Mm.
of them really collaborate well in terms of acting. And I do think that Justice Smith is a good actor, but David Allen Greer is like leagues, decades,
Mm.
like past what Justice Smith can do. And that's
Yeah.
just because of his experience. That's nothing against Justice. But seeing David Allen Greer like act in this movie was like so interesting because he is a phenomenal actor. I think he's a very strong actor. And I feel like it would have been fun to see him in a movie about magic and like black people being magical beings if it was like something of whimsy and something that was like joyful and not something where like you have to knock down all the obstacles so your white client can like live a happy life and then you're stuck like cleaning up all their messes. Like that doesn't feel like that's not something that I would have wanted to see him in because honestly anytime
Interesting.
yeah anytime you see like a black person play like a magical being, they're either evil or they're just like obviously assisting white people. And I feel like the
Yeah.
only good example I've seen, not good example, but a better example of black people being like a mystical being was Rachel True in The Craft, which honestly is
Okay.
like, I love her. I think she was phenomenal in that movie. She was not wrong for her, like bullying. Like she had a bully in the movie, and she got back at the bully. And then everybody was like, Rachel True's character, I don't remember her name. They're like, Rachel, you shouldn't do that. She had every right to do that. That girl deserved what she got. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I think this is the thing is that like I'm ultimately not opposed to the proof of concept. I think he's super good in it. And I think that like the reason it feels so bad to watch these like talented actors play these roles of magical Negroes is because they don't really critique the trope.
yeah.
They don't break it down. It doesn't feel like the magical Negroes get to break their own system down. It just kind of falls off. And it's like, this is the way that things are supposed to be. And that feels bad. I
Mm-hmm.
think it would have been fun to watch them really have a full, they like talk about the sparklings of a rebellion, but like a full sort of that's the purpose of the movie moment. And that wasn't the purpose of the movie. And so you're just kind of left feeling a little about it.
It also feels like if there was a whole society of magical Negroes meant to help white people, there isn't a black person in charge. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is maybe a strange example, but BET, right?
Okay. Yeah.
BET reruns every single Tyler Perry production ever made. And could BET make new shows? Yes. Could they make different content? Yes. Very true. Very possible. But Tyler Perry makes money, and also BET is owned by Viacom.
Yeah.
Like, how likely is it that Viacom wants to see an Insecure on BET? Not likely. So, to me, it feels like the American Society of Magical Negroes is almost like under some kind of curse by some white
Mm,
wizard, which I feel like would have been more interesting to dig into
mm.
because what makes you think black people want to like live their lives pleasing white people? What kind of curse? What kind of like yoke put upon my back would that be? You know?
I That's interesting. That's interesting. I think that would even if they question that, it would give it more room because it's kind of like in the space where like maybe it is that yoke, maybe it is that burden. Like this, like sort of in the same way that black people will be like, oh, like let's say like Megan Thee Stallion posts a video like twerking or something. They're like, hey, that's bad for us as a whole. The people, the unfortunately like the Bill Cosby pound cake speech where he's like, I see the people with their pants down, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, we need to step it up, and that's like for especially for older generations, like a real viewpoint that is most definitely like built in from like white oppression and white supremacy in the old days. But there are people who are like the reason black people haven't it gotten further, the reason why black people haven't caught up is
Mm-hmm.
black people's fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that would be a more interesting trope if there is no secret white wizard in charge, and it's like it's the society itself that these actions of the magical Negro society that they think are helping black people are also playing into what's keeping them down. Interesting idea for a plot that's not there. Like there's so many things that could have been done to break down the trope. They just weren't interested in doing it.
Yeah, that's
Huh?
true. I definitely agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I feel like with everything you've said, it's clear that the movie like has a vision for what they
Yeah.
want to do, but they kind of like missed the mark with that. And the romance part of the movie obviously like kind of sacrifices like where we're going, like the direction of it. And the romance part creates like this vast tonal shift within the film itself. But
Yeah.
I don't think you have to like you can do the romance part, but it doesn't have to be with like some random white girl. Like it could be with the witch. He could have fallen in love
Yeah.
with someone within the society, and then they both could have been like, "Hey, this is fucked up. Why are we doing this? Like, we're wasting our life doing this, and like, we shouldn't have to, subjugate ourselves to worrying about the whims of white people and their feelings if that's just gonna like control us for the rest of our days. Like, we should be able to like live our lives and like use our magic to have like to be like a powerful magical being and to waste your talent on like making a white person happy. Like, babe, you'll be shackled to that white person and their ancestors for the rest of your days. Like, you need
Yeah.
to be free.
That's an interesting idea. That brings like that's such a more interesting concept if like instead of this love story between this random white presenting person, or not white presenting, but rather what's the word, because I don't think she's like aiming to be white. I think she just is, can
Racially
be
ambiguous.
she's racially ambiguous in a way that can
Yeah.
be perceived as white.
Yeah.
But particularly instead of making it that, if the thing you just said, right, it's a story between two of these young wizards who aren't supposed to use their magic selfishly, right? Like that's a whole rule, is that like if you use your magic for your own good to help yourself, then you lose it, right? But what if like plot twist, right? If these two wizards fall in love and they can't really be together because they're only supposed to use their magic to help white people, what if they found out that using that magic to help other black people also lose the
Hmm.
power? So if they're not using it for themselves but using it for each other because they loved each other, and
Yeah.
they're like, whoa, we don't have to sit here and be subservient to white people. If we use our magical Negro magic to help other black people,
Hmm.
it still stays connected. It is community power or something, something, something more interesting than what happened. There's like this is the thing that gets me, is that this movie appears to be just like a hotbed of better, what could have been a better movie.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think like yeah, it's like yeah, even this fact that the romance aspect of it just doesn't, as you said, it feels like two different movies. It does not really tie in. Like had they made them, they could have made a film that was about a black guy starting at a startup who works in a lower position, who realizes that his boss, his like higher up person, has these strong feelings for this person he also has a crush on, but he's a diversity hire. Like that plot could have existed independent of Magical Negroes, and it would have been probably a better movie. Like it's just odd what they chose to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that it feels like this movie is just the epitome of wasted potential, that so many
Yeah.
different movies could have come out of this idea, whether it be on the romance front, the
Hmm.
magical Negro front, these stereotypes, this community, black people, all these things. And the movie that they chose to make was not the movie that anyone wanted. And
Right.
I think that that's like, just disappointing if you're a romance head, if you're somebody who just wants to see more black people represented in film. Like you
Hmm.
don't even get that, right? Because
Yeah.
the black people take a back seat in
Hmm.
this movie to the like, and that it's one thing to like be like, we have black people taking a back seat and have the black characters be the main focus of it, but literally making the black characters even take a back seat to the white characters in the story, it's
Hmm.
like, no, this is not a film for, does not feel like a film that's meant to make black people feel some type of way.
Hmm.
The target audience couldn't have been us.
Yeah. I feel like I definitely agree with you on that. And you are right. The black people do take a back seat in this film, which sucks so much. Another thing
Yeah.
that sucks, like you had just mentioned, if somebody wants to make a movie in the future with black people being like mystical, magical beings, they're now going to reference this movie, like studios will reference this movie and be like, I mean, this didn't do very
Yeah.
well, so I don't know. Because it's the same thing with like films like the Marvels and like Madam Web, when like
Yeah.
films with like certain casts, like a female led superhero, don't do well in the box office, suddenly people are like, I don't know if we can keep doing these movies. Like that's why right now Marvel was like in a proxy war for a while because there were board
Yeah.
members. There's like one board member who was like, I don't like Black Panther, I don't like Miss Marvel, I don't like any of this diversity shit. In fact,
Mhm.
let's get Kevin Feige out of here and let's get somebody else. I'll head Marvel if I have to. And then all the other
Mm.
people on the board are like, absolutely not, sir. You sound like a crazy old man. Get back, like, fuck off somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
So, with this movie now not doing so well and being pulled from theaters because of like a not so positive response and like mixed reviews from critics, it's very clear that if somebody tries to make another film like American Society of Magical Negroes, it won't be well regarded, which sucks because like you have shows like Lovecraft Country that people
Yeah.
really liked and adored, but you know, studios like to look at like certain examples that are just like overarchingly bad, and it's like, I mean, yeah, that one looks good, but like this one was shit. So why should we trust this? You know?
Yeah.
And they're also greenlighting. They also already greenlit the Harry Potter series, so it's
Oh yeah.
yeah. It
I think it's something I would like to say very very cocky and outright. You give me this exact same cast, this
mm,
exact same budget, I would write a better screen. Let me remake same title, re-release it. Let me film a whole new thing. I guarantee. Like it's just such a waste. It's such a waste. It makes me a little upset. That's all.
yeah, it is disappointing because you see movies like The Blackening, which is,
Yeah.
in my opinion, similar to American Society of Magical Negroes, because the American Society Magical Negroes is a trope in like film, and it's the black person that has this amazing power that helps a white person along in their journey. And The Blackening critiques like black characters that always die first in horror films. Like in Scream 2, I'm pretty sure Scream 2, when Jada Pickett Smith and Omar Epps die in the very start of the movie, which I saw happen, and I cannot tell
Mm.
you how awful that was for me as a young child because I used to watch a lot of movies that I was not supposed to watch when I was a kid, and
Mm.
that scene where Jada Pickett Smith gets killed in the bathroom is something I will never erase from my memory, ever.
Yeah.
And The Blackening is like a horror film full of black people that, for the most part, all survive at the end, which is something unheard of
Yeah.
when you have like a black person in a horror movie. And The Blackening also flips the trope on its head by also discussing the fact that like blackness is not a monolith. Like
Yeah.
you can be black and like friends. You could be black and smoke weed or just like be gay and be black. Like you can be black and like a number of different things. And it sucks that the American Society of Magical Negroes failed to do that and instead like honed in on the trope, but then kind of like became a lackluster, weak, and a little perplexing of a movie that was not really not really great if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also agree with you on what you said about how like this is a movie that is kind of like made for black people, but it's not really like made for black people. It's more made for
Yeah.
like white people because if you have to make any kind of film that is like a satire or critique on race, you have to make white people comfortable enough to watch it so that you can sell tickets. But the disappointing thing about that is that you lose a lot of substantial critique that you can have within the film, which honestly sucks. And there were two other pieces of media we're going to talk about, which is also Blackish and American Fiction.
Yeah.
Um, I did want to talk about American Fiction because I feel like it does American Society of Magical Negroes better because it is a very
Mm.
solid film. And, it won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, which it deserved. But I feel like, me personally, the movie missed some marks when it was talking about diversity. I know it's talking about diversity in publishing, which I can understand, but I feel like because the movie is based off a book that was written in the 90s, it's a bit outdated for the conversation that we have now. And I could be wrong because we just talked about the Good Times reboot, which was really bad and like
Yeah. Yeah.
harped on a lot of stereotypes. So I could be wrong, but I feel like for the most part, when you talk about media, we already understand that like black people do not fit into like a box and a stereotype. Like when you have shows like, not my mind blanking, Insecure, you have shows
Yeah.
like not Power. There are so many shows that I can't think of right now. But like when you have all
Yeah.
these shows with like black casts that are being made, I feel like a lot of times the story of American Fiction gets lost in translation. Not lost in translation, but it's like an outdated story, I guess.
What's interesting, I think, is that when I originally watched it, I didn't feel it to be as outdated as when I watched the director talk about it. Because this is the thing is that I think that while we are no longer so much in the era where they're only making gang movies about black people, like it's always got to be like it's struggling in the hood, like classic, no shade, classic John Singleton movies. Those movies hit, but like that was like the archetype for black movies. I still think that like a lot of black film, even the really really good ones, the series what's the one with the she was in chewing gum and then she wrote her own series. It's like I
May
May Destroy You
Yeah, May I
or
Destroy You?
I'm going to show you. And then also like Moonlight and things like this is that they're still like, while the thing that we're not selling is this 90s gangster archetype anymore, the thing that we do still sell is Black suffering, right? Like the idea that like the thing that makes something like Atlanta so appealing, or the things that make something like Swarm so appealing, it's like specifically this idea of Black suffering. And while it appears more and more diverse, it's like Black people have to struggle on
Mm-hmm.
screen for it to be worth investing in. And I think where I get separated from that point is that I remember watching an interview after he won the Oscar, and he was like, finally, it's not, they're showing that Black people can be kinds of different. And it's like, well, that's not a problem. I mean, it is a problem, but it's like lots of different Black experiences are happening right now.
Yeah.
Lots of different experiences are being shown. And it's weird to me that instead of focusing on the aspect that's like, why do Black people have to suffer for this to be deemed worthy of funding? Why are you focusing on the aspect that's like, they'll never show like a nerdy Black man like me? Like, it's like, that's not the point. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, and it's like you specifically exist in the realm where they want you. Like, you are the person who they are bigging up right now. They want the intellectual, in a suit, smart Black man. And like, that's
Mm-hmm.
what they want. And it just gets to me, I think.
Yeah. I do see what you're saying. And I feel like also the director, I feel like he made a good choice picking Jeffrey Wright to play like Monk, because Jeffrey Wright is also known for playing like the guy in the glasses who's like the smart guy and like ask all the questions. Like he was in Westworld and Batman. He's always the man like trying to like figure out what's going on. And another thing that his interview at the Oscars was interesting because how do I say this? I still think that like he's right, like the film is right. There are a lot of stories that aren't being told because of like the gatekeepers in media, but Corey Jefferson is a light-skinned Black man, and I think that like I don't know. Sometimes I still think about like colorism that exists in like Hollywood, and I'm glad that this
Yeah.
movie was made, but I do know that a lot of times like creators only make stories that are a reflection of themselves, which is fine. But I think like Cora Jefferson having this movie and it's really good, it's really great, and I loved it. But I cannot help but think about the fact that like Tracy Ellis Ross died in the first 20 minutes of this film. You have
Yeah.
Tracy Ellis Ross. Her name is on the poster of this movie and she's gone.
Yeah.
And now we're just focusing the story on two Black men and a love interest who isn't really there for the most part. And then you have Issa Rae, who is a phenomenal actress, but she's barely in the movie. So the story is
Yeah.
really centered around like two Black men. So it
Yeah.
feels really interesting to have like a story where like certain Black stories aren't told that often. Yeah, that's very true. And as a Black woman, I see that very often. And the fact that you
Yeah.
sideline the Black women in this movie to like a couple of lines is really interesting, especially because like Tracy Ellis Ross, Golden Globe winner Tracy Ellis Ross,
Yeah.
dies. And I feel like her perspective
Yeah.
would have been really interesting because I'm sure Erica Alexander's character would not have been the only person who would have had something to say about Weeze lives in the ghetto, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think what happens is necessary to the plot, but
Mm-hmm.
also you just didn't have to write the plot that way. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Where it's like you hit the point where if she doesn't die, Monk's life is together, right? But you also didn't have to write the plot to where he needs his sister to die for
Mm-hmm.
there to be like some sort of form of conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's genuinely, yeah, it was a shock when she dies because I was like, she's so bright on screen, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it's like, oh yeah, that for while she's there, she lights up the screen, but it's like, yeah, the story needs the conflict. He can't be happy. We make the sister the one that brings like the joy and the peace, and then we kill her off. And yeah, I think this is like, I think what this is like, it's the Boondocks problem,
Hmm.
right? Not to keep referencing the Boondocks, but the Boondocks has no important Black female characters. Like genuinely, like when you stop to think about like the main cast, the show, who's giving depth, who's giving interesting, there's side characters who are black and come in and pop out, but there are no like main cast important black women. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, why? Just why? And there's so many, like Monk's girlfriend, his mother, their their help, right? The woman who they paid to clean up and take care of their mom, the
Mm-hmm.
sister. It's like you create all these characters who have depth, they just don't get any time. They get no time, they get no exploration, they exist and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
As for Monk's development in particular, but Monk and his brother do get a lot of character development, right? And yeah, I don't know. I think that like as much of an issue as it can be, it's the problem with Atlanta, it's the problem with Boondocks. It's that like a lot of the black men who have this opportunity to tell black stories often neglect black women's stories like a lot. The only one that I think is inherently maybe a little excusable is Moonlight, because that's inherently like this it's about masculinity and a queer male black experience, but all these other stories have no real justification for there never being depth to any of their like black women characters.
Yeah. And I think that American fiction, I feel like it kind of does what it critiques almost, because when you kill off Tracy Ellis Ross, who didn't need to die in the movie, I'll stand by this statement. She didn't need to die because you could have easily had the whole family with him throughout this time in the film and it would have been fine. Because I think that him having to deal with his mom and her Alzheimer's on his own, and also his brother, like the family drama pulls away from the whole thing that's happening with his publisher and the book he's trying to write. Like, I get that you want conflict, but you can have one singular conflict in your film. You don't need two pieces of conflict, because then we're like pulling attention away from certain things. You know, like at one moment he's helping his family, the next moment he's arguing with his publisher. One moment we're helping his family, next moment he's like talking to this white man who's the director. And then he thinks his mom has left the building and now he's worried and he's scared. He's running after her. Like, it just feels like there isn't like there is obviously like a focus in the film, but the family drama I feel like takes away from it. And I really do believe like
Interesting.
you could have had this movie where he's just struggling with his publisher, struggling with these studios that want to adapt his book into a movie, and have his family by his side. You didn't have to like leave him with like his Alzheimer ridden mother and his brother who is going through identity crisis, and also this
Eh,
woman he's just met, and also like having to lie about a book that he has written that he doesn't actually want to write, but he wants to prove a point. Like, all of this does not need to be
Interesting.
happening in one movie.
Interesting. This is something that I feel like I disagree with you on, because I think this is the thing that made me kind of like it, was that the author, the book plot kind of takes a back seat to what like feels like a movie for a white audience to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a movie for a white audience in which they think they're being tricked into understanding race or things like that. And that's not the most important thing. I feel like I wish the story was written in a way that doesn't kill off, or at least gives the black women more interesting characters, and maybe doesn't kill off Tracy Ellis Ross. But I think the sly thing of the movie is that it just tricks you into watching a black family, and that to me is like, I was like, oh, like the important part of this isn't, there's no necessarily resolution in a lot of the conflicts either. You see that it's kind of just, here is a slice of life of a black family dynamic that you would normally never see on screen, like a complex. And it's like, I Tracy Ellis Ross is so good, and I wish they hadn't written it in a way that kills off this character. But it's like you get to just see black people existing and dealing with a variety of struggles, just relationship issues, dealing with like white people get these stories, right? White people get stories of like taking care of your elders as they get older. What does that look like? What's the struggle there? Little love moments between older people, love moments and struggles with yourself, like relationships with family, like all that stuff to me was like, this is what the trick is that this whole thing is happening, where it's like they want to see this story, they want to see fuck the name of the book, right? We struggling, like this whole thug archetype thing, and they've tricked you into just caring about a tender family that has issues. And I think it could be done better. I think it does the thing that I think I agree with you in that it does the thing that it's trying to critique. But I wish, like, I think it's very sly and just making people care about a black family. And I was like, yeah, I think that's what I'd have to rewatch it again. But I just like, that was something that I appreciated. It was like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, what did you watch? The book shit doesn't, how much did it matter? It's a minimal amount of the screen time even. Whereas like, what's going on with him and his brother? How does he take care of this? His own personal struggles. It's like taking care of the house, you know, like the most tender and emotional moments are just that between him and his family. And it doesn't really matter whether or not the book actually did he get the award? Did he not get the award? Like, why is the movie happening? It's like, that's not as important as just watching this family. And I wish it was, you know, I wish it wasn't done in a way that killed off all the black women or, you know. Oh, I can't hear your mic now.
Sorry, I accidentally muted my mic. My bad.
Okay.
Okay, I totally get what you're saying. I do agree. This movie does do a pretty like, it is like kind of like a sly way of you watching a black family, since this film is kind of like one of those films where it's explaining race to like white people. But I feel like for me personally, I would have just rather have learned about like the book. I would have rather just like
Mm,
understood like the critique in the film, because there's one scene where he's like trying to write the book, and I wish I remember the actor's name who was like acting in this part. But as he's writing it, there are these two actors like acting it out and portraying what he's writing, and I felt like that was so interesting. And when they started introducing that mechanic into the movie, I was like, oh, this is so cool. But you only see it one time and then you never see it again, and that's the only time we ever get a glimpse at like his writing style, or like actually seeing him write the book that he's supposed to be publishing, because writing is
yeah.
not an easy thing to do. And I think if you have an author who is used to writing stories where like it's not a black story, it's a story with a black person in it, and it's something that's
Yeah.
smart, well written, well reviewed, but doesn't sell a lot on the shelves, and he's someone who goes into a random independent bookstore and sees that his books are shoved into like the African American section, and he wants to pull them all off that section and put them into the section he thinks they should be. I want to explore that more. I want to explore his thinking, because I personally don't like Monk. I think that Monk is pretentious and annoying, and I
Yeah.
think that his critique towards Issa Rae's character's book, "Weez Lives in the Ghetto," like I find it to be obviously like uppity. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he thinks that he's better than her as a writer, and he never took the time to actually like read the book. He never took the time to actually like sit through the actual like reading that she had, or hear about the book. Like I don't feel like he actually took the time to like delve deeper into it. And that one scene we have at the end with him and Issa, the two of them together, is the only time we ever get to know about her book, because we're seeing the full movie from Monk's perspective. And as
Yeah.
I'm watching the movie, and like Monk is like going on and on about like how like they don't want my story, they don't want real black stories. I'm sitting here like, nigga, what do you know about black stories? What do you know about black
Yeah.
stories? Have you read this
Yeah.
book? Because he gets upset that like his girlfriend is reading the book that he wrote as a joke, and she also
Yeah.
read Issa Rae's book. And I'm just sitting here like, well, I mean, she's reading. I haven't seen you pick up a book this whole movie. Like, I
Yeah.
don't understand, why should I trust this guy and his opinion and his thoughts? What makes him more like educated, and what makes him more like knowledgeable than me, someone who reads? I want to know. I want
Interesting.
to see that.
Do you think that the movie wants you to like Monk?
Damn, that's a good question. I don't
Because
know.
because this is the thing is that I think that I didn't get that by I specifically once you get to the moment where he and Issa Rae are having that conversation and she's like, "Why do you think you're better than me?" And
Yeah.
everything she's saying is fully justified. He's been building up this whole story in his head, and it's like, you don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do you not know me, you never gave the chance to know me. You never gave my book a chance. You
Mm-hmm.
never gave any of this a chance. You never saw me as a person. You saw me as the reason why you couldn't succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Monk is ultimately, he loses the girl. He doesn't necessarily write the thing. His books aren't recognized in the way that he wants them to. He's still kind of a pretentious asshole. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like he learns to be gentler and softer, and he learns some form of a lesson. But I don't think we're supposed to like Monk. He's a dick. Like
Yeah.
and I don't even think the story wants you to view him as like any less pretentious than he is. And I think it's interesting that you had that reaction, because it's like, yeah, no, he's wrong. He's wrong, and he wants to. It literally kills him inside that
Mm-hmm.
people like his joke book more than anything he's ever written.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like maybe at the end of the day, maybe his books aren't that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not. Maybe this idea that he has of himself as like this deeply prolific writer who everyone should be respecting for his other works just is his own perception. And
Mm-hmm.
we're always seeing it from his perspective, his very, very selfish perspective. He's selfish at the beginning, and he barely learns to be unselfish at the end through necessity. You know what I mean? Where it's like he has to take care of his mother. He has to. And it's just one of those things where, yeah, I think it's interesting because, yeah, it's like in the latter half that he's like mad at his girlfriend for reading his book, and just it starts being mean to her without any explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And like only in the fictional ending does he win her back.
Yeah.
In the real ending, like in the what he's saying, what really happens is that he doesn't even, they're not together. He doesn't
Right.
call her, like nothing happens. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like he's just a dick.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't get a good happy ending. People like his fake work more than his real work.
Hmm.
He's not above Issa Rae. At
Yeah.
least Issa Rae had some level of authenticity to what she was writing. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? She took the time. She did the research. His was just his drunk imagination of what he thought people wanted.
Right.
You know?
I also wanted to jump back on what you had said earlier about like the family dynamic, because now I realize why they focus so much on the family, because I feel like Monk has this idea of like, I feel like he grew up, this is what I got from the movie. I feel like Monk grew up feeling like he wasn't black enough, or feeling like he
Mm,
wasn't like black in the way that people thought blackness is. And
yeah.
he only thought that because like his family was pretty well off, middle
Yeah.
class, his family is okay. But that was like the idea that he had in his head and the image that he had, because he held his father in such high regard. And as we get to know the family more and we get to understand like what the family was really like when they were younger, we soon learned that like his dad was not faithful and not a great
Yeah. No.
dad. And
No.
that kind of archetype of a father is something that falls more in line with what people think stereotypically of black fathers. So
Yeah.
he probably didn't want to think of himself as like just any other black person, or like the black person that white people think that he is, because he looks down on those kind of black people. So I feel like he kind of like pushed that away in his mind. And I really feel like that's what kind of led him down this path of like, trying to exist outside the monolith of blackness, which I can understand because, like, I'm a black person that likes alternative music and I love musicals as well. And it took me a while to, like, really get into rap music. Like, I feel really bad saying this, but I only got into rap music because I liked Hamilton so much. And I was
Oh, that's
like,
crazy. Continue.
but, you know, I, God, I feel like in a past life, not in a past life, but like when I was younger, I was more like Monk, where I was kind of like, I'm not that black. Like, I'm not like those people.
Mm,
But seeing Monk kind of come to the realization that, like, your family wasn't this perfect, beautiful, like, standout family that was unlike other black families. Like, your daddy was dirty. He was
yeah.
doing your mama dirty, and you lost your daughter, you lost your sister because she was battling hypertension and stress as black women do. And there's another thing, like, no, I don't need to get on that, but I think that him realizing that as he got to know his family more and as he spent more time with his family, I think that's another thing that really helped him understand that, like, the things that you perceive in your life and the things that you think about yourself are not all right, sir. Like, it's not
Yeah.
100% there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It kind of I feel like his ideals, whether or not they intended this, very much so reflect like the whole idea of the talented 10th.
Hmm.
Like I feel like earlier we were talking about, or rather, when we were talking about the American Society of Medical Negroes, I was talking about like there's a specific type of black person who believes that it's like black people's jobs, black people's job to uphold themselves. Like it's like the reason why we're not getting to where we are is
Yeah.
because we're not presenting ourselves that way. And like when you see his conflict, Monk's conflict with Issa Rae's character, where he's like, why are you writing this story about us? Like you're like your whole series of books is the reason why I can't get black people seen as more than archetypes. And it's like, why do you think that you're better than me? Why do you think that you're not an archetype? Why do you think that this is what brings us up? I think is that crucial like self issue that he has with himself, the reason why he runs away from home, right? Like in the original, it's like you haven't been back in years. You're not dealing with the problems. You're not dealing with us. You have to isolate yourself as this campus professor who deserves this respect, who deserves this attention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think like that's the thing that I think that like is interesting. That's like if you view it from a perspective where you're not meant, he's the protagonist,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not necessarily meant to like him. He does most things wrong.
Yeah.
The one thing that he does is like he cares about his mom, and he's kind to what's her name? I can't even remember the lady who like is like cleans for them and stuff. I can't remember her name,
I
but
don't remember her
she
name.
like he does right by her at the end. There's the wedding. It's super sweet, but it's like specifically just like he's not good and he's not right even. And he's right in the sense that like this is the product that they want, but like he just becomes a part of it too. And I think the only lesson he really learns is that whatever barrier that he was trying to keep himself out, like I'm above this, I'm better than these people. It's like, no, we're all having to play this game, whether you be from the elite upper crust family that he is, like, right, his dad is doing his family dirty, but they come from some money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they're all just doctors, two doctors, he's a writer, he's a professor, like they come from this upper crust idea of what a black family should be, but he has to play the same game as the black people from poverty that he thinks he's better than.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like no matter what you think you are, how you think you exist, like you're not this special, you're not this only unique black person who lives a different experience. It's like we're all black and
Yeah.
you've made your like you're in your lane, but like you're playing this game,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. And Monk's anger is obviously displaced. Like he shouldn't be angry at like the black people that are just trying to make it and get their books published. You know, he needs to be angry at
Yeah.
like the publishing industry. You know, in the same way where he was like kind of brought onto the board of people that were like voting on what books would get like this special prize. Um, it's clear that like these white people are only looking to read one certain thing, and it's just what they understand about black people and black stories from what's already been fed to them and their own limited worldview of what black people are and what black stories look like. It's not your fault. You know, that's
Yeah.
on them. And for you to be upset at black people for trying to adhere to that so that they could get a check, it's not even like fair because you're doing the same thing, sir. Because aren't
Yeah.
didn't you just get let go? Not let go. I guess
Yeah.
like put on suspension or whatever. But like
Yeah.
also, it's so funny. He takes his anger out on his literal white students that pay tuition to
Yeah.
go to the school that he teaches at. Like you cannot
Yeah.
ask your students if their ancestors owned slaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not that's not a
I
conversation they want to
I feel like
have.
it's not a conversation that would I feel like that's actually I think the only part of the the movie that might break my reality is that like when that show was when the book was written in the 90s, I don't think you could ask your students that.
Mm,
I think you could probably get away with it today. I think you could maybe a little bit. I don't know. Like we're kind of turning that corner back around as like people get, they're like, oh, CRT, DEI, like that whole thing is happening. But I think there was a nice window, especially like when I was in college. I feel like your teacher would be like, you probably own slaves. I feel like I lived in whatever window was
yeah.
happening in the 2010s. But I feel like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I do want to mention also, I love Sterling K. Brown's character in the movie.
Mm,
And I feel
yeah.
like it's hard to say this, but I really wish that he won something for like his character work in
Oh
that
yeah.
film because he was a very I think Sterling K. Brown is just a phenomenal actor altogether, but him
Yeah.
playing someone who is like funny, charismatic, also heartbroken, like someone who's just struggling
Yeah.
to figure out who they are, is so funny and also so interesting. And I'm going to be very honest, Erica Alexander and Sterling K. Brown were the only funny people in that movie. And Tracy Ellis Ross, when she was in the film, but like it's not that the movie, I guess, like I think the movie is like kind of funny, but it's not supposed to be like a laugh out loud comedy, so that's fine with me. But like Sterling K.
Yeah.
Brown and Erica Alexander's like chemistry together was so perfect, and that's what I wanted to see with him and Tracy Ellis Ross, since they were the one doing all
Mhm.
these press interviews and You Lied to Me movie when you told me that Tracy Ellis Ross was gonna be in this movie. But that's okay, it's fine, we can move on. But I feel like
Yeah.
his character work as like him finding out he's a gay black man was something
Yeah.
that obviously you don't see a lot in like cinema, and I really enjoyed that. I liked seeing him like understand that he has a place in his family despite like his sexuality, and that he can
Yeah.
be himself, and him kind of like reconciling with the fact that like maybe his father knew that he was gay, maybe his father didn't, and either way like he's still going to live his life. I felt like that was like a very beautiful thing to put in the movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's really a really heartwarming moment when they're coming back for the wedding and he didn't know they were going to come back to the beach house,
Mhm.
and he expects some sort of punishment,
Yeah.
or like I think that's I think it's weird because it feels like such a deeply human. It reminds me of a thing that happened to me once, where like specifically it's genuinely like a core memory for me. Is in college I was late to a tech rehearsal, which is one of those things that you can't ever be late for, right? It's a big deal. And my professor, she took me outside and she was like, let's talk. And so she just went outside and she lit a cigarette and she was smoking it. And she was like, did you expect me to yell at you? And I was like, yeah. Yeah. She's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to yell at you. She's like, you have to make these things because if this is what you want to do in your life, you need to do it. But like, it's okay. Life can be hard sometimes, but I'm just going to smoke my cigarette. And it was both the scariest thing, but also like the weirdest thing. It was like more motivating and almost more, it like hurts you more
Mhm.
when like you want something, you feel like you've done something that needs punishment. You're like, okay, just do it, get it over with. Tell me I'm the worst brother in the world. Tell me I shouldn't be here. What is it? Sniffing coke with twinks in
Mhm.
our family house. And they're like, we're just happy to see you here. Is almost more hard. It's like that's so much more to deal with than if they had just been like, I can't believe you're in here. Like he's trained for the fight. He's trained to
Mhm.
yell. He's trained to have comebacks, all that kind of thing. But like he's not as prepared to just have like a genuine a genuine moment, and it's just like sinking. It's really good. I love that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I also love that moment because I feel like in any other film that would have been played for laughs, like that scene,
Yeah.
and he would have like received that punishment in a way. But to be met with like compassion and understanding was something that was like so, I don't want to say bizarre, but something I wasn't expecting, and I'm happy that I saw that in that film, because for his character to like understand like he has a place in this family and who he is now, or who he has realized he is not something that's going to like have him casted out of like his family. I feel like that was a really beautiful thing to bring into the film, and I think that it really brings like a human element to the movie, when we're watching it, because it's this like battle he has with like publishing and like the expectations of him as an author, but also to have his brother who has to deal with this expectation of him being a man, and what does it look like to be
Yeah.
like a black man, to be married and have kids, and like suddenly you realize you're gay, and like does that take away from your masculinity? Like, am I less than? Like, how do I navigate this new discovery that I've realized within myself? And I think that scene is a very beautiful thing to bring into the film.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. It was really nice. It was really nice. I think that like now I'm just talking because it's like now the more I think about it, I have to rewatch. The more that I think about it, I think I do actually. I remember leaving that movie, specifically the feeling I had after watching it was like, did I actually like that movie, or am I just a pretentious Negro? And I think I literally said that the moment I walked. My friend's like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, I feel like my glasses. I need to take a second and take a step back before I
Right.
say how I feel about it. But like in retrospect, just sort of the foil that like Sterling, I mean, they're dealing with different things, but Sterling K. Brown's character and Jeffrey Wright's character are both dealing with two of the big same. I mean, Sterling also has a different grief that he's been dealing with for a while, but they're dealing with two of the big same griefs, which is that they've lost their sister and they're losing their mother to Alzheimer's. And it's like you're watching them handle it in such different ways that, despite the fact that they are brothers and in some way they should be there to comfort each other, they are just like incapable because their view on how this needs to be handled is so different. And like, I think that there's this interesting dynamic where clearly Monk views what his brother is doing as escapism, right? The drugs, the partying, all this. He's like, oh, you're escaping. But Monk himself doesn't view like the way in which he tries to pour himself into his work or push his mother off as somebody else's responsibility and like dive into like getting mad about all these really stupid little things. He doesn't view his own path as escapism. He's consistently viewing himself as smarter than and more put together than. And I think it's interesting to see that like unfold as these like two black men are unable to console each other through like immeasurable grief because they're two like in their own ways in some way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. It can be hard to like move through grief, especially when you're trying to deal with, Alzheimer's. That's a very difficult disease to have your family deal with. And when he finds out like his mother is going to need so much care and so much money, and he realizes like I kind of have to write this book and take this movie deal, otherwise I will have no money, and yet continues to
Yeah.
like judge Issa Rae's character is so
Yeah.
ironic to me because like at the end of the film he just kind of like accepts like this is where his life is, the movie's being made, he's gonna get paid, he works with Anna Brody now, like it's fine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I watch the movie I kind of try to like place Monk in like the real world, you know what I mean? Like I look at this
Yeah.
guy and I'm like, who is like a black creator who makes things like this simply for the check and not because like they actually think this is good? Because I, in my heart of hearts, can't think of anybody. Because like Kenya Burris, he feels like he's making actually good work. Tyler Perry believes in his work. Like Monk
So
thinks,
Tyler, continue.
like Monk wants to be like an individual and a standout. But like one thing that I have noticed in terms of like black authors, you cannot get your book like well regarded and like you can't get any kind of acclaim or any kind of attention on your book unless it does include some kind of struggle or it's a book about race, because white
Mm.
people love it when black people explain race to them, and he does not want to be Malcolm Gladwell. He wants to be
Yeah.
like a distinguished narrative author. And there are plenty of stories that people have written about like black romance and black joy, but have those books sold as many copies as, not me forgetting the, you remember that book that turned into a movie with Amanda Stenberg?
I could just Google, but
Because
man, is it Dear Amanda's? Trying to
it's,
think, because
I even forget the author's name, and I actually read that
The
book
Hate You
before.
Give.
The Hate You Give, yes. If you are a black author and you do not write a book like The Hate You Give, it is you better hope and pray you could get that book published. And if it gets published, it gets released. If it gets released, you better hope you can sell some copies to make back whatever money you spent in like creating this book to begin with. But if it's not something similar to like The Hate You Give, then it's hard to get published. Especially like I don't know if you know anything about like book talk drama, but
Mm.
there are, for some reason, authors who are pretending to be other races so they can get their,
Yeah.
yeah, so they can get their book published. And it's hard enough for like black creatives to get their books published, sold, and actually make some kind of profit off the book they make, but to have authors like pretending to be different races or just simply like bullying and putting 0-star reviews on black authors' books that way
Yeah, I
their
saw
books
that.
are well regarded, that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned is interesting because I'm trying to think of specific. I know there are examples because I know there are people who specifically act in like the way that this manifests to me it manifests in acting. But I can't think of an example. I know one, and it manifests in rap music. Acting in the way that there's like people who don't want to consistently have to do like the slave role,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's like, I would love to be given a deep Shakespearean character. I would love to be given a deep sci-fi character, but I'm relegated. Like, if I want a good role in a film, I've got to be the struggling slave, right? And on the other side of that, something that's interesting, speaking because we were talking about the Vince Staples show earlier, is I think Vince Staples in an interview was talking about like, he's like, like, I'm not banging right now. Like, I'm not gang banging. That's not the reality of my life right now. But like, that's what sells at the end of the day, right? It's like a lot of, I think you see this in a way where people understand. I think it's different because I'm not necessarily sure that people want to be pretentious as much, but there's a lot of artists who aren't, this is no longer their life story, right? After a certain album, they're no longer, they're not in the streets banging and doing this. It's like, this is now the story you sell. This is now the reason people listen to you. Maybe there are elements, for some of them, there are elements of authenticity, but for a lot of them, that authenticity might have never been there, was only a product, was always played up, right? Like, I think specifically, I don't think he wants to be this person, but I think about Rick Ross. And Rick Ross he's the boss, he's the lord and stuff. Rick Ross was a correctional officer, he was a prison guard, he was not a drug baron, and this is like a character that he puts on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, I think that in hip-hop you see a lot of people don this fabrication of a character that they know audiences want to hear. You know what I mean? Like,
Like
even
21
Drake.
Savage.
21 Savage. Well, 21 Savage was going through some. 21 Savage was going through some things. His life is good now,
Yeah.
but it's like he's still. It's like you can't get to 21 Savage's fame and then be like, let me rap about my immigration troubles.
Right.
Like you know what I mean? Like, it's like at a certain point, like they have to keep. Gucci Mane has been. He's not in the trap anymore. You know what I
No.
mean? He's in fashion brands. He's got a lot of money. All these people are no longer in these places,
Mm-hmm.
but are still having to like, it's like, that's what, if they miss when hip hop is rapping, then Killer Mike would be platinum, where it's like people don't want rapidy raps, they want that struggle. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is authentic. Every time there's like, it's such a, hip hop in particular, black art in general, but hip hop in particular is such a fast consumed media where it's like they want the next guy. They want
Mm-hmm.
the next guy now. They want him to be even more gritty. They want TK. They want a 15-year-old on the run from the cops because he was involved in a robbery, and they
Mm-hmm.
want him in jail. And as soon as he's in jail, they'll find the latest like. And I think that in itself is a weird consumption cycle, that if you succeed, maybe you did one day live that life, but like you're no longer living that life, and you have to keep rapping about that life that uh, you know I don't know how much you know about the rapper Pusha T, but he's been rapping about selling coke for 25 years. He did
Right.
the McDonald's jingle 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You haven't, like, that hasn't been your life. You are the CEO of a company, sir. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Wasn't his last album like? It's not When the Paint Dries. It's something else. It was like another name,
Uh,
but it was like,
it's close though. When it dries, Pusha T. No.
yeah.
How do I? Almost dry. Yeah, it's almost
Yes.
dry. Yeah.
Which is also like a euphemism for like making drugs, which is so funny because like,
Yeah. Yeah.
sir, I've seen your house. You have a
Yeah.
very nice house. Like, I love
Yeah.
how I love your raps. I love your music, but like, he's not in the struggle anymore. And I
He's
think,
not in the struggle anymore. No.
yeah. And you were talking about actors that like kind of have to like portray certain roles and they want like new roles. I thought of Jimun Hunsu or Hunsun. He
Who's that?
he has been in a lot of movies. He was in Rebel Moon. He was in Shazam. He's in the new Quiet Place movie, the prequel, Quiet Place Day One.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He has been in a number of films. He's also been on like blockbusters. He's been in like Academy Award nominated films. But he has spoken about in an interview how even though he's been in all of these amazing films, he is still regulated as a side character, and he has never really been given like a leading role in a film. Like, he hasn't been given a chance to
Yeah.
be like a leading man. And that's something that I find like so disappointing because he is a really good, strong actor. But Hollywood has not given him the space or the
Yeah.
role to allow him to shine as a leading man. And this man is like probably pushing 60 now. And for how long
Yeah.
he's been acting, he's well overdue a leading role, you know?
Yeah.
It's those examples that I think about that I feel like American fiction still has a place within like pop culture where like a film like that and that critique does need to be talked about because the fact that American fiction is a film that was nominated is very interesting when you think about other films that obviously have been snubbed for like the Oscars in the past. Like
Yeah.
me personally, I love the film Miss Juneteenth because Nicole Bahari is amazing in that film, and it didn't get any like recognition. And even like last year, 1001 was a film starring Tiana Taylor, which was also a very strong film and an amazing film, but basically got no attention at all
Mhm.
during award season, despite it being amazing. And then you also have Ava DuVernay's newest film that she released with Ingenue Ellis. Oh my gosh. Not me forgetting this movie. Hold on. I have to look it
Is
up
that
real quick.
Origin?
Origin. Yes, it was
Yeah.
Origin. Like that film is based off a book called Caste, How We're
Yeah.
Divided, and explores like racism and the caste system and how like throughout society we've always been marginalizing people that are different from us. And like that movie is not something that is always regarded by the Academy, which I find ridiculous because Ava DuVernay is an Academy Award nominated director. Ajanou Ellis literally direct nominated for an Academy Award the year prior, and for both of these two women to like not have their film be regarded or even have like a wide push in theaters is frustrating to me because it's
Mm.
literally films like that like talk about. I know a lot of people could look at 1001 and think of it as a struggle film, but I think it's a beautiful story that people should see and people should watch. And the fact that it's on Amazon Prime and Amazon Prime did not push that movie, I will remember that. Okay, don't I will not
Um.
forget. And also, Ava DuVernay's movie, like anything Ava DuVernay has made recently, I feel like is being like sidelined, which I find to be very frustrating, and I don't understand why. But then like you have a film like American Fiction, which I love and I think is a very strong movie, but I don't feel like that movie is as does it, I don't feel like that movie has like such a strong message as Origin does. And that's something that I
Yeah.
kind of find like frustrating. Like American Fiction does have its place, but at the same time it's like, girl, we didn't even go really that deep into what you were talking about. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like I feel like we could have
Yeah.
gone deeper, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting. I had to look something up. I think very interestingly, Lupita has only I think this is in the thing where I think like you can be one of the most like talented people and respected, but her only Oscar nomination that she won her Academy Award for is
Mhm.
12 Years a Slave. And I think
Yeah.
that like for all of these actors, for them to be recognized, they kind of have to you have to be in that kind of movie for them to take it seriously. Like oh, I'm gonna mess up his name. Mashallah Ali. What's his name? What's his name?
Mahershala Ali.
Mahershala Ali. Yeah. Mahershala Ali. Like the Green Book. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like that's what he's recognized for. You know what I mean? That's his like that best picture. It's nuts, right? Like it's one of those
Mm.
things.
I know what I'm talking
Um,
about that movie.
but fair. I also think I have to wrap it up soon. But I feel like the Green Book is one of the those films that's like this is the kind of thing they want to see, and it's
Yeah.
like this is insulting to the talent of Mahershala Ali, who like is really good. I'm
Yes.
trying to see
Also,
like he's one. Go
Daniel
ahead. Sorry.
Kaluuya won a Academy Award for Judas and the Black Messiah, which I feel like he did deserve. But at the same time, I really wish he had won it for Get Out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead that year, it went to Gary Oldman for that freaking Winston Churchill movie.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. They love those.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, since you have to go soon, we could just do like 10 minutes, and we could just dive into like Blackish real quick.
Okay.
Yeah. So talking about American fiction and like movies about or TV shows that explain race to white people, I did want to touch on Blackish real quick because I feel like that is the prime example of something that was made for I don't want to say just for white people, but Kenya Burris has said in interviews that like Blackish is a show for everybody, which
Mm.
I feel like okay, fine. However, the thing about racism and talking about like black culture and like commentary, there needs to be like a point that you hit, and there needs to be a point you hit where it gets uncomfortable for the viewer. And I feel like the Boondocks is a really smart example that you keep bringing up, because the Boondocks over exaggerates a lot of examples, like when they talked about R. Kelly or Tyler Perry movies. Everything the Boondocks has said is so poignant to this day, but Blackish kind of just like skirts the issue and they try to be cute about it. And I know it's a sitcom, but if you're going to talk about like black culture and comment on race, you need to do it in a way where like it hurts somebody's feelings, or else you're not doing your job.
Yeah, I will say this is a thing that is that I've only, and it's been such a, this is the one bit of research that I really wanted to do, but if I had so much work before this week, but I've only ever seen a couple of episodes of Blackish, and I really didn't like it. And I think the
Mm,
thing that really resonates with me is that it does, and no shade, it does just very much so feel of the Hamilton Obama era, where it's like what we, our view of race at that time, I feel like felt incredibly optimistic in a way that's like what we're viewing as like this multiculturalism. This is the future. We just have to tell white people how we feel. And I feel like in the years that have passed, a lot more pessimism has entered the conversation. The way the movements have changed, the where the Black Lives Matter movement was at in like 2015, 2016 versus like where it's at now, and what happened in 2020 and the combination with COVID and things like that. It's like I find Blackish to be a show that has an optimism that is missing from reality,
yeah.
that doesn't feel like the way black people, doesn't feel like the way that black people have conversations about
Mm-hmm.
race. Doesn't feel like the way that, like, it just feels like it's missing just this element of tiredness, of weight. There's an episode that you mentioned here that I want to know more about. To the lost episode, what is Please Baby Please about?
So that episode is an episode they released after Trump won the election, and Dre is talking to his newborn baby about what the world will look like in the future. And it's something that I don't know if it was something that was pulled from ABC, because they also had an episode about like Colin Kaepernick, which is something that
Mm,
was removed. Like ABC never aired it, and they
interesting.
pulled it from Hulu as well. And
Interesting.
I think that even though Blackish, I feel like softballs commentary, there is a certain point where you have to understand that like ABC loves Blackish. Like they loved Blackish, they loved Mixish, even though it only went one season, and then they loved Grownish on ABC turned Freeform. But ABC still has to like be beholden to like their viewers, their shareholders, like the corporate
Yeah.
heads. So you can have your cute little black show, but if it gets a little too black, that we can't do that, because Colin
Mm,
Kaepernick, is not like an easy subject to cover. And I think with like the Bye Bye Baby episode, I think that it was well handled, so to speak. But you are right where Blackish has this optimism that is not something that is rooted in reality, because
yeah.
me personally, I was surprised when Trump won the election, but that's
Mm,
because I was like an 18-year-old kid who didn't really understand politics out of the scope of what I already seen on like the Colbert Report and the Daily Show.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't understand
Yeah.
politics behind that lens. And the Colbert Report already had like this kind of nihilistic view on politics already, but yet left leaning. And watching that episode is so interesting to me, because he's like, we're gonna be all right, which is like this sentiment that black people usually have, like, oh yeah, we're gonna be all right. Like, how much longer are we gonna be all right? This shit is getting hard. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was an interesting era. Moving from the Obama to the Trump era, early days, where you have like the Tina Fey sheet caking rant, you've got the Women's March, where
Mm.
everyone's got the pink pussy hats, like everything. This sort of like we can do things the same way they've been, and if we like, and I think that's sort of like I think part of the legacy of the Obama era, unfortunately, is like looking like what we thought or how different it would feel for there to be a black president, for just for like the reality to set in to be like, oh yeah, like everything is still bad. Like the Black Lives Matter movement started during his presidency, right? Like it's one of those things where it's like we had a black man in the highest position in the land, and everything still feels so inequitable and
Mm-hmm.
so awful.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and not
definitely
only that, but oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say it's definitely a reflection of now how like Biden and so many Democrats were in office, and yet like we have yet to see any kind of like strong movement in terms of like student loan forgiveness. And now
Yeah,
we're currently heading into the next election, which is so much fun. And
yeah,
there are students protesting on their college campuses, protesting against the genocide in Gaza, and it feels like a reflection of what happened 4 years ago, where there are people who have like this idealistic view of the world, and you think because you have a black president, like the figurehead of this country, that things seem fine and things seem all right. But that does not matter because there's still structural issues. It's the same way
yeah,
where you can be like, oh, well, Beyonce, Jay-Z, Rihanna, and Oprah are billionaires, so there
yeah,
is no income inequality anymore. And baby, that is incorrect. Because they
yeah,
are billionaires, there is still income inequality because who is making Rihanna's lingerie?
yeah,
Ask
yeah,
yourself
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was a real not even just the lingerie, the makeup too. It was a
Mm-hmm.
real disappointing moment where it's like I think specifically Savage X Fenty has like a lower ethics rating than Shein, and it's like, eee, like that's rough.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah, no, they've got a lower like production ethics rate than Shein. So you had to like put that into perspective. It's like, yikes.
Damn, girl.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
it's tough to see, and I also like gave Blackish a chance because there are some good episodes, I will say. At times it's a
okay.
funny sitcom about black family, but when you introduce like the commentary, and also when Dre introduces his white coworkers, I don't care for any of these white people at all. They're all annoying and I need them to shut up. Like,
Mm,
I like Dion Cole. I think he's a very funny comedian, a very funny actor. When you watch any of his stand up, he gives very much like 90s all deaf comedy jam. And some of the
yeah.
jokes are funny and some of the jokes don't hit anymore.
Mm.
So you kind of have to consider the people that are there, like in the show, like the cast and the
Yeah.
writers. It's like, why are we making this? And also, why does Kenya Burris keep making like 5 different copies of Blackish? Like, it's the same thing.
You gotta keep that money rolling.
I mean, I understand why he went from ABC to Netflix because Shonda was on that same, you know, path. She was like,
Yeah.
y'all did not appreciate me with all the money I brought in, which yes, she did, because people are finally live tweeting shows again and actually tuning into shows
Mm.
live and talking about TV after Shonda introduced Grace, Scandal, and How to Get Away with Murder. Thursdays were fucking lit. So I
Yeah.
remember that era. But like I think that Kenya Burris did a good job of like reviving the black sitcom in a way, but I think Blackish
Yeah.
was like the right move, you know?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the other things he's done because I didn't realize that he wrote White Men Can't Jump, the Jack Harlow version, and the You People. I didn't realize that he was this. Also, he wrote Coming to America 2.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Intergalactic,
Mm-hmm.
the Kid Cudi thing. I was not aware that these were all him as well.
He's been busy.
Okay.
Also, You People is like
You People.
Blackish but longer because Lauren London and Jonah Hill start dating and their families meet, and like the cast is so stacked, but the writing is awful. Like
Yeah.
it feels like with Blackish especially, it was just like Twitter discussions recycled, and then You People is like, okay, these are tired arguments that we have on Instagram comments that you just made into a
Mm.
full movie. Like, why is Eddie Murphy here? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
sir, I think you're great. I love Nia Long. I think Nia Long is the best part of the movie, to be honest. Also Julia Dreyfus, still hilarious, still funny, deserved every
Oh
single
yeah.
Emmy she got for Veep, but like it didn't
Jeez.
work. And also Jonah Hill and Lauren London had no chemistry. And Lauren London is
Oh yeah.
fine. Like, fine as hell.
It's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. But did you have any like final thoughts?
No specific final thoughts. This is a really interesting conversation. I'll have to like check out a little more Blackish, and it actually makes me want to rewatch American Fiction again because I was like, damn. I have to check. I have to give Blackish a shot. I'll give Kenya
Hmm.
Barris. I feel like I've been particularly harsh of everything that Kenya Barris has ever created, so I'll
You
give
know
it
what?
a
You were
shot.
right to. You had every right to be because I've seen just about
Oh my
everything
god.
he's made, and it was against my will. I would like to add because for some reason, black people love Kenya Barris.
Okay. Jeez. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we could end off the podcast with some recommendations. Guys, this is our final segment where we talk about some movies and TV shows we'd like to recommend to the audience. One movie that I want to recommend because I recently rewatched it was Abigail. It is the horror comedy that recently came out, starring Melissa Barrera, and it's about the seven criminals that kidnap a child, holding the kid for ransom because her dad is rich, and they soon find out that the kid is a vampire ballerina, and
Mm.
chaos ensues. And I just want to say, I'm so glad the movie was not spoiled by the trailer because that shit was so good. I love that movie. I enjoyed it so much. And I love seeing horror films where, like, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict what's
Mm.
going to go wrong, but I'm just freaking out and I'm scared. And I feel like people who watch more horror movies than me could probably guess what happened at the end, but there were a couple twists and turns at the end. I was like, damn, like how'd that happen? But it's a really good movie. It's a really solid watch, and I do recommend you guys go watch it, please, because I feel like it's going to like have a dip in the next few weeks in terms of like box office numbers, but I loved it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I feel like I have two recommendations as always. I'm trying to recommend people watch the Vince Staples show. I think it's a very special little, it's 5 episodes, 26 minutes long. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's about a 2 hour movie, even shorter, even if you watch all the episodes. It's a nice watch. I think it's very silly, very interesting, very characteristic. And the other thing, like currently in theaters, is that I saw Monkey Man recently, which is the Dev Patel, like Indian action film, kind of like John Wick inspired. And it's very good. I've seen it twice actually.
Oh.
Yeah, I've seen it twice because the second time I went with a friend of mine from India, and so then I got like a good bit of view into like the politics of India,
Mm-hmm.
and India has crazy. I feel like I hopefully what I'm about to say isn't problematic. I feel like they respect to their population because we have like 300,000 people. I think the population of India is like 1 billion
Oh
people,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
1.2 billion. It's like I think they have that relative amount of Trumps. Like I don't know how to
Mm.
explain this, but there's like 5 Trumps, and you know, like it's like the level of like absolutely like, oh, this is the critique. Like this is what's going on politically in India, and this movie is like a big critique of what's happening politically in India right now with like
Mm-hmm.
the queer communities and like nationalism and like religion and like
Mm-hmm.
essentially like I think the thing that's cool is like imagine if like Joel Osteen or
Mm-hmm.
TD Jakes could directly endorse a president. Like what would that feel if you were going up and it was like
No.
I need all of my people to vote for this man right here. Like
No.
if Joel Osteen could do that, like
Not Joel
that's
Osteen. Not that man. No.
right. And so it feels like oh yeah these like religious leaders have all this power and they're
Mm-hmm.
directing all that power to these like really corrupt government officials, and it's like yeah, I think it's an interesting and with just a lot of fun action with
Mm-hmm.
that like Facebook. Yeah, those are my recs: Monkey Man and the Vince Staples Show.
I do want to say I loved Monkey Man. I thought it was an amazing movie, and I only had like a beginner's level knowledge of like what's happening in India. And I think that after watching the movie, it did push me to like learn a little bit more about the politics. And I think
Yeah,
that's one thing that I love about Monkey Man is that like this movie is such a phenomenal film, and like a lot of people could see it as like a kind of John Wick inspired action movie because it kind of is. But the politics in it are not like spoon fed to the audience. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like me
yeah.
personally, I felt like I lost some things because I didn't understand it. So I felt like, oh, that dampened my experience. But then when I read more about it and I understood it more, and a friend of mine like talked to me about it. Her name's Alexa. She's been in the podcast before, guys. You know who she is. I did some research and I was like, you know what? This shit actually slaps. And I feel like that's what I want from black content creators. Like I
Yeah,
want you want a movie or a show where like it's black and I don't want to explain shit to white people. You just got to
yeah.
pick up on it. Like
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting that you'd say that because, like, yeah, like we've spent a lot of this time talking about like how much do you need to explain to your white audience. Monkey Man doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. You just have to like pick it up from the story, go look it up after, like, you know what I mean? Like, but it's clearly like not like it's enjoyable to
Mm-hmm.
audiences not from India, but like it's clearly like meant for an audience from India will get all the things about it.
Right. Like you don't want to hold their hand through the story. You want them to like,
Yeah,
be a big boy and like learn it, like understand it
yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
What was the other recommendation you had?
The Vince Staples show,
Yes. It's interesting that only had like 5 episodes, which
5 eps. Yeah,
it sucks, and I hope that season 2 has more.
I hope a season 2 happens.
I feel like streaming services are now doing shorter seasons because like they've been
Yeah,
canceling them more often, and it's like,
yeah,
it's the thing with the writer's strike, like small writing rooms, like people not getting like
yeah.
contracts paid well enough, and like not a lot of time is. It's really like irritating and frustrating, and the show is
It,
really good.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think we just also budget things differently. The way that they're working is they're giving, like, they're trying to do 8 episodes that have this huge budget versus like if you go watch an old show, it's like this season has 22 episodes, right? And it's like that's not 8, 10 episodes max
Mm-hmm.
now. And it's like they're putting a lot of budget into these and we're getting a lot of quality TV in a way that like is very interesting, but it yeah, just different realm now.
Yeah, absolutely so. You know what, Christian, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was very wonderful to have you on. Where can people find you?
Thank you for having me. For one, this was super fun.
Yeah.
I'm on Christian Divine on all my like TikTok, Instagram. It's XIANDIVYNE. So it's spelled weird, but that's the same everywhere.
Okay, awesome. Guys, don't forget to check out Christian on TikTok. All of his socials will be in the description down below. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, where you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on all our socials. And don't forget to tell your family and friends about your new favorite podcast. I've been meaning to watch that. And I will see you guys next week with a new topic, a new guest, like we do every single week. Bye.
Bye.